Hello everybody and welcome to the Noel for GCSE Live. Hopefully you can see me either from TikTok or from YouTube because I'm streaming on both today. Yes, so in this live we are going to be doing practice on question 3 and 4 of English language. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at some exemplar questions, looking at how to deal with different texts, and then we'll be writing out really top level marks and top level answers together. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, do ask. If you're on TikTok, maybe you might want to move to YouTube. It's easier to see your questions, but it's up to you. Okay, so we're going to use a similar document to what we did last time. So I'm going to share my screen. So let me share this resource as well in the chat so you guys can access that. But yes, we're going to be starting with a set 2 question here. The sets are just random. This document is really good. It has loads of different paper 2 practices. So we're going to start off with this set and we're going to, as I said, focus on questions 3 and 4 of the different sets. So how I always recommend starting is not to go ahead and read the whole of the 2 extracts that you're given, because remember, paper 2 is 2 extracts. I would recommend instead going ahead and saying, okay, I'm going to read the question, see which part it directs me to, and then read after that. So read the question first. Now, also, we're going to do a Kahoot at the end of this live as well for English. Yeah, this is live on YouTube as well. Okay, so let's look at this question 3. Well, let's start with question 2, but we'll also do some question 2 practice. Why not? So question 2, 3, and 4. So you need to refer to source A and source B for this question. The experiences of children in the 2 prisons are very different. Use details from both sources to write a summary of differences. You can take notes if you want to. We will be going through writing a top mark response, so maybe you can, or maybe try and answer it yourself in that time as well. So your question 2 is always going to be a summary, either summary of differences or summary of similarities. So you always need to make sure you're focusing on which one is which. And on top of that, you have to refer to both. So this is a bit of a hard question, but it's only 8 marks. So it depends what order you want to kind of do this question in. Oh, you can't see the screen. I'm so sorry. Thank you for telling me. Here. Okay, thank you. So this is a question. You need to refer to source A and B. The experiences of children in the 2 prisons are very different. So you're given a statement that's quite overarching. I don't really know why they give you a statement, because your task is to really just write a summary of the differences, but it's the differences of the different experience. So let's see how we can answer that. Let's look at both sources then. Remember, they are non-fiction. Hello everybody who's joining. Okay, so we've got our first text, which is the end of innocence inside Britain's child prisons. Okay, so you get a little summary box here. This is for AQA. Yes, sorry, but it is partially applicable to Edexcel. So you've got a bit of a summary here. Paul Valley accompanies the arrival of a new inmate to one of Britain's child prisons for under 14s and describes the experience. So the car turns into the driveway of the large Edwardian house. I'm not going to highlight everything. As the car, let's highlight as we read though. As the car approaches, a shutter at the side of the building rises. 2 men get out of the back. So does the small boy who has been sitting between them. The child is one of the 150 children in Britain today who are so violent, sometimes at an age as young as 10, that they have to be locked up. The building is one of 10 secure children's homes throughout England with innocuous names like Red Bank, Vinnie Green, and Clayfield. This will stay on the channel afterwards, don't worry, if you want to come back to it, which keep them under lock and key, for the protection of the public and, in many cases, for the good of the children themselves. The boy is escorted from the garage across a corridor along which he can hear the noise of other children in the dining room. He glances nervously towards the sound as he is shepherded into a meeting room with a long, narrow table and works of art on the walls done by previous inmates. Whether or not they admit it, no matter how hard they are, they're scared. That's a quote. The unit's manager, a social worker with 2 decades of experience of detaining these children, tells me when the boy is gone. But before that, he does an introductory run through of the unit's daily regime. We get up at 7:30, he begins. The boy looks shocked, as if he thought that 7:30 only happened in the evening. Breakfast at 8:15, then chores, hoovering, dusting till 8:50. Then education with lessons till 12:15, including a short break and then lunch. Then education again until 3:30, until which there is some individual or group work till tea at 45. After that, it's homework for an hour. Homework, said the boy incredulously. Can't I go on the Xbox? Homework for 1 hour, then after that, structured activities. Craft work, model making, gym, badminton, table tennis, volleyball, said the manager. Then, after that, maybe some time on the Xbox, if you've earned the privilege. We have supper at 8:30, and then it's off to bed with everybody, depending on their age, locked in by 9:30. 9:30? I don't go to bed at 9:30. You do now. There is nothing here of the atmosphere of a Victorian gaol. There are no bars, but the windows are thick plastic that can't be broken. The doors may look wooden, but that is veneer of a heavy steel core. Young people are not here to be punished, the manager says afterwards. The punishment is being locked up. The punishment is being locked up. Hello, everybody who's just joining. We're just reading the first extract, and then we're going to read the second extract, and then we're going to attempt a question 2, which is summarizing them. He takes the boy into the dining room. Everyone puts on weights here, jokes the manager. Everyone puts on weight here, jokes the manager. The food is good, with 3 or 4 choices, including salad, sandwiches, and a healthy option. You can get chips, but only on Fridays. The boy turns to look at the staff behind the grill. But he is not interested in the food. He is avoiding the gaze of the dozen or so other residents, a mix of boys and girls aged between 12 and 15. Now, remember what it was like on your first day, the manager says to the others, introducing the boy by name. And don't go bombarding him with questions. The kids sit 3 or 4 to a table with an adult. There is a gender mix of staff who wear their own clothes rather than uniform, as staff do in the units for older children. We're after something approximating to a parental relationship, said the manager afterwards. We use first names here, the manager tells the boy, because respect doesn't come from titles, it has to be earned. And that's a two-way thing. If you don't like me, that's all right. But if you call me knobhead, we'll deal with that. It's a warning, but it's a matter of fact and contains no menace. They leave the others to their meal and walk through the unit. In the lounge, the television set is boxed into a wooden bookcase with a huge perspex screen in front of it. They get smashed, the manager shrugs to me. You can only watch films or play games with the appropriate age certificate. There's no Grand Theft Auto in here, he says. The other cupboards are mainly filled with books. We're very keen on books. This is a practice paper. The inmates are given 30 minutes worth of phone calls free every day. It's not a privilege, said the manager. Later, we want to encourage them to talk. It's the step to everything. Even kids who never had time for their mothers outside find they want to talk to their mums once they're in here. It's one of the first changes being locked up brings. He is moving through the unit towards the sleeping quarters. Bedrooms, he calls them. But when he opens the last door and ushers the boy in and says, "This is your room," he might as well have used the word cell. It is frighteningly austere and Spartan. The walls of the cell are bare. A boy may be allowed to put up posters later, but nothing more. You can't hide much behind a poster, the manager says. Inside, the boy looks around the stark cell. The door thuds shut with a deep, resonating thud behind him. He lies down on his bed and stares at the high white, bare ceiling. A ghostly disembodied voice echoes eerily from the intercom by the hatch in the door. "You all right then?" He replies with a single word and turns his head into the pillow and begins to cry. They call it a secure children's home, but he's in prison. There is no mistaking that. Okay, so that is the first extract. Now, normally you get two different extracts, okay? One is in the 21st century and the other is going to be in the 19th century. So when we're writing that summary of differences, that question two, you do not want to say that one difference is the time era. This is for AQA. You don't want to say one difference is a time era because that is something that's given to you. You can watch this live on YouTube afterwards. Okay, so we're going to read the second extract, which is the 19th century non-fiction again. So, let's use another colour. In 1897, the writer Oscar Wilde had recently been released from Reading Prison. Shortly after, he writes a letter to the Daily Chronicle newspaper about a recent story they have published. It was common in the Victorian era for children to be put in adult prisons. There's already a difference, and we haven't even started reading it. Sir, I learn with great regret through the columns of your paper that the warder Martin of Reading Prison has been dismissed by the prisoners' commissioners for having given some sweet biscuits to a little hungry child. I saw the three children myself on Monday preceding my release. They had just been convicted and were standing in a row in the central hall in their prison dress, carrying their sheets under their arms, previous to their being sent to the cells allotted to them. They were quite small children, the youngest, the one to whom the warder gave the biscuits, being a tiny little chap, for whom they had evidently been unable to find clothes small enough to fit. I had, of course, seen many children in prison during the 2 years during which I was myself confined. Wandsworth Prison, especially, contained always a large number of children. But the little child I saw in the afternoon of Monday the 17th at Reading was tinier than any one of them. I need not say how utterly distressed I was to see these children at Reading, for I knew the treatment in store for them. The cruelty that is practised by day and night on children in English prisons is incredible, except to those who have witnessed it and are aware of the brutality of the system. The terror of a child in prison is quite limitless. I remember once in Reading, as I was going out to exercise, seeing in the dimly lit cell right opposite own a small boy. Two warders, not unkindly men, were talking to him with some sternness, apparently, or perhaps giving him some useful advice about his conduct. One was in the cell with him, the other was standing outside. The child's face was like a white wedge of sheer terror. There was in his eyes the terror of a hunted animal. The next morning, the next morning I heard him at breakfast time, crying and calling to be let out. His cry was for his parents. From time to time, I could hear the deep voice of the warder on duty telling him to keep quiet. Yet he was not even convicted of whatever little offence he has been charged with. He was simply on remand. That I knew by his wearing his own clothes, which seemed neat enough. He was, however, wearing prisoner's socks and shoes. This showed that he was a very poor boy whose own shoes, if he had any, were in a bad state. Justices and magistrates, an entirely ignorant class as a rule, often remand children for a week, and then perhaps remit whatever sentence they are entitled to pass. They call this not sending a child to prisoner. It is, of course, a stupid view on their part. To a little child, whether he is in prison on remand or after conviction is not a subtlety of social position he can comprehend. To him, the horrible thing is to be there at all. In the eyes of humanity, it should be a horrible thing for him to be there at all. Okay, so those are the two texts. We finally read all of them, and we're now going to begin by answering question 2, which is to write a summary of differences for the two extracts. So going back, we are going to answer this question here. So let me copy and paste this onto the document, and I will make this document available with all of the answers so you don't have to feel that you must take notes. I hope your guys' half term is going well. I know it's quite difficult to revise in the half term, but don't worry, you guys are almost there. You're almost done with your exams. This is AQA, by the way, for those asking. Okay. So let's see what we can say. With our, since this is only 8 marker, you don't need a massive lot. And since it's just about writing a summary of differences, it shouldn't be too difficult to do. So making sure that we can see there. Okay. So we can start by saying in source A, which remember is a 21st century text, in source A, and then I'll write in blue. Remember, writing a summary of differences. So in source A, we can say the writer portrays the restrictions placed on the children as more of a necessity and generally quite fair. Okay, so continuing on, we need to then support this statement, this comparative statement that we've said, so we can then say the writer employs dialogue, igniting the light-hearted and comedic exchanges that seem to subvert the preconceived, miserable, and dim prison stigma. because every time that the journalist is engaging in conversation or talking about the dialogue of the child, it seems just to be more about being nervous rather than complaining about the actual experiences. Okay, and then we can say the the question. You don't have to focus on any language devices here. You just want to literally use quotes to evidence your point, your point of difference. So you don't need to focus on the adjective here. Just literally say the question, the sentence, etc. So the question: Can I go on the Xbox? I think it was. Can I go on the Xbox? Injects some humor which seems to be reciprocated by the manager. And you can put that in quotes as well, because that's what he is referred to as in a text. So be reciprocated by the manager, who, and then the manager literally jokes as well. And that's said in the extract. So if he's joking, if a prison warden is joking, then there's a sense of not being as horrible and miserable as you might think a prison would be. So he jokes, and we can even say the joke that everybody puts on weight here. And that joke is quite interesting. It almost glorifies the prison conditions. Okay, so glorifies the prison conditions. I see people saying that these questions are very different to what the questions are actually going to look like. This is what the questions look like. So for AQA, as I said, you have your question 2, which is your summary question. Then you have your question, which is an 8 marker. As you can see here, your question 3 is a 12 marker, focusing on language. Your question 4 is a 16 marker, and you've got to talk about the whole of both text and talk about language and structure. And then, yeah, that's it. So that is how the exam is structured. Okay, continuing on. So the seemingly glorifying the prison conditions further perpetuated by the behavior based rules which seem fair and just. And then you can say on the contrary, within source B, and let's make this a separate paragraph so it's obvious to the examiner. On the contrary, within source B, and then what can we say? We can say the writer exacerbates the dire infringements shackled on the almost innocent children. So, in the second extract, we see that Oscar Wilde is using his ability for rhetoric, i.e., persuasion and convincing people, by saying statements like, going back to this extract, we can see statements like, at the very end, in the eyes of humanity, it should be a horrible thing for at all. So it's quite a declarative, and the choice of the modal verb should suggests this idea of necessity. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, and we're going to talk about that now in our point. So he uses very convincing language. Um, so the declarative, and then we can just copy and paste that. So in the eyes of humanity, it should be a horrible thing. Firmly or uses moral, almost moral laws to set in stone or to highlight the negligence towards children in the Victorian prisons. Ooh. Ooh. Okay. And then we can give some more quotes to support this. So we can say, our next point in source B, the writer portrays the ill-fitted and spine-tingling prison wear that tiny children wear, conveying the idea that they do not belong, just as their clothes physically send that message. So we can then say, using a quote, the fact that they were unable to find something that fit suggests that children shouldn't fit in prisons likewise. And then we can compare this back to source A. So whereas in source A, the writer I'm giving multiple points. So yeah, in this, you can see that I'm giving 2 points each, and that should be enough for an 8 marker. So the fact that they were unable to find something fit suggests that the children shouldn't fit in prisons likewise. Whereas in source A, the writer refrains from explicitly suggesting that the children do not or should not be locked up. And then we can give a quote that supports this. So it could be the quote where he's describing the kid's background and the kid's history. So they're described as so violent. So we can say, by classifying the children as so violent, the writer expresses a plausible reason for them being in the institution, as opposed to Oscar Wilde challenging of the societal of this societal issue. Okay, so that is our we're doing geography after this. So that is our answer to our 2 marker, or our 8 marker, sorry. So we're now going to move on to answering the question 3, which is the 12 marker, I believe. So going to the question 3. We've done question 2 and we're on question 3 now. So you now need to refer only to source B. So in this case, they focus you on one of the sources. Oscar Wilde's description of the treatment of children in Reading Prison. How does Wilde's use of language create sympathy for the child prisoners? So it's almost a very straightforward question, but you need to remember to stay focused on that. And now we're talking about language, so refrain from talking about structure and don't go too much into literature by talking about possible context because we don't know too much about that. This is language paper 2. Okay. By the way, if you're watching on TikTok, I would recommend you come onto YouTube because everybody who's a real one is there, and TikTok is just so that you guys are aware that we're doing a live right now. Okay, so let's start, and we're focusing on 2B. So, focusing on 2B, and we're looking at how Oscar Wilde has created sympathy when discussing the plight of the children, effectively. So, let's go through now. I need to unhighlight everything so we can actually go through and find any sort of language where children are represented as drawing sympathy from the reader. It's okay if you're late. We're just starting question 3 now, which is just based on, remember, one extract here. It's focused on how has the writer, Oscar Wilde, created sympathy, presented the children as requiring sympathy. Thank you for everybody who is sharing the live. I don't do just GCSE business, unfortunately, and yet we will be doing a Kahoot at the end. Okay, so now we're looking at language that presents the children as very sympathetic. So let's see, skimming through this, we've got a little hungry child. That is a very sympathy drawing phrase. What else have we got? Standing in a row, central hall in their prisons, carrying their sheets under their arms previous to their being sent to the cells allotted to them. They were quite small children. The youngest, the one to whom the warder gave the biscuits, being a tiny little chap. So we talk about the semantic field making them very small. Here's a document for those of you who want it. I'm sharing it on the YouTube live if you want to access the document. And then once I've written all of the answers, then I'll share that document as well. Okay, tiny little chap. What else have we? For whom they had evidently been unable to find clothes small enough to fit. Again, the sense of small and them being young, or Anything else? You've got the little child again. So really that semantic field, and then you've got tinier. So tinier, small, tiny, little, little, little. It's been repeated multiple times. It's that method of rhetoric, convincing the war he's sending a letter to that they deserve to not go to jail. Okay, I need not to say how utterly distressed. So you've got the amplifier here, utterly distressed. I was, for I knew the treatment in store for them, the cruelty. Look at the severity of the words he's using. The cruelty that is practiced. The fact that it's day and night, suggesting it's normal, it's by nature, and it's embedded into every aspect of their life. It's inescapable. The brutality of the system, it's, it will be incredibly shocking. So looking at the severity of the word here. Okay, what else have we got? And also the terror of a child is limitless. Not just limitless in itself, but quite limitless. Again, using these amplifiers. We've got a small boy again. And what else? The child's face, white wedge of sheer terror. You've got a nice simile being used there. There was in his eye of a hunted animal. So you've got a metaphor as well. And you've got that animalistic tree. It's almost like prison is stripping children of everything that differentiates them from being animals. Their voices are being taken away. They are being dominated by adults and abused effectively. Okay, the next morning I heard him at breakfast time crying, calling to be let out. His cry was for his parents. From time to time I could hear the deep voice of the warder on duty telling him to keep quiet. Yet he was not even convicted of whatever little offence he has been charged with. Again, little. So now little is being, instead of being used to describe the child's, like their size, is now being used offence. It's suggesting that it was so petulant and it didn't deserve to be it didn't even deserve to be in jail for that crime. Survival of the fittest, children don't stand a chance. Really good idea there. That's a nice way to annotate it. Okay. He was simply on remand. That I knew by his wearing his own clothes. Continuing, he was a very poor boy. Again, the amplifier, very there. In a bad state, justices and magistrates, an entirely ignorant class, as a rule, blah 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 blah, to a little child again, and then you've got that final sentence there, which highlights everything. In the eyes of humanity, it should be a horrible thing. So the declarative, the modal verb, the things that we were speaking about. Now this is a language focused question, so we can talk about all of those things in depth. So now let's go back onto answering the question on our amazing Google Doc, which I'll show you guys once I've answered it. So copying, pasting the question. Remember, this is a 12 marker, unlike being often the 8 marker in paper 1. So the mark allocation is slightly different. So you want to put a little bit more effort into this than you would a question 3 for paper 1. So let's see how we can answer this. Well, I think the best way, because it's looking at the description of treatment of children in Reading Prison and it's a language question, I would always say the best approach, if you don't really know which, nothing's jumping out at you immediately, maybe start chronologically and that might get you some points. So you can say, firstly, the writer draws the reader's attention or the reader's sympathy. Let's reword the question. Via the portrayal of the child as small, timid, and ultimately defenseless. Now, I would always recommend when you are talking about something, whether it's language or literature, always describe something with your triplets: small, timid, and ultimately defenseless. It's showing to the examiner that you're not just taking a single approach to this. One thing will lead to the other, which will lead to the other. So, the writer draws reader's sympathy via the portrayal of the child as small, timid, and ultimately defenseless. And then let's support that with some evidence now, which we'll put in another colour, let's put in purple. So, evidence: the writer employs a semantic field of language that is small, or we can say of small and inadequate language visible in little child, quite small, tinier, and the repetitive use of little. Okay, and then we can do our analysis on this. So using another color, which is used to convey the petulant nature of the crime and the very mismatching enormous punishment that is paired with it. This contrast heightens this sense of, or this necessity for children to be released from this terrible institution. Okay. Actually, we can say here, which is not only used, because as we said, first it highlights children as defenseless, so which is not only used to portray the children as poor, defenseless, and needy, but furthermore used to convey the petulant nature of the crime. Okay, this is going on to 2 pages, so I'll make it all on 1 page. By the way, you can watch this on playback on YouTube on the Novel for GCSE YouTube channel if anybody's asking on TikTok. How long have we been doing this live? 44 minutes. Okay, we'll hurry up a little. Now, our next point that we can say to create sympathy for the child prisoners, the simile in the metaphor. So, our next point, the writer employs simile to translate the extent of fear, and we can quote embedded quote terror as that's used, and terror that the child is struck with. Thank you, Chidima. Okay. And then we want to supplement this with the actual evidence. So again, changing colours to purple. Through the simile, the child's face was like a white wedge of sheer terror. We can say the writer evokes the image of a helpless, anxious child that needs the reader's sympathy by painting the victimized child. No, and we can say, and through painting the victimized the child as a, it thus suggests the horrendous prison system is a villain that needs to be overcome. Okay, so there was the analysis towards the end, so I will change color there. Okay. And then we can say, as our point, our zoom in, we can see alliteration in the white wedge. So alliteration is further utilized in white wedge to extend the fear felt by the child. And then we can say another point, the later metaphor the terror of a hunted animal and since that's a quote, we'll change colors here, and we can say employs or parallels, combines the children with this animalistic imagery, thus infantilizing them and as we were speaking about before, drawing parallels to how they are silenced and abused by adults and the prison system. The vulnerable and defenseless position evokes the reader's empathy. Okay, and that is that point, and then we're going to just do one more paragraph because remember this is a 12 marker, so you want as many points as possible. Okay, so we're just answering the question 3 here. Remember, focusing on source B. Oscar Wilde's description of the treatment of children in Reading Prison. How does Wilde use language to create sympathy for the child prisoners? We've done 2 paragraphs, from now on our third and final paragraph. Geography live, we're literally doing that. What is it? At 7:25. So in some time. So after this question, we might do a Kahoot. Yeah. So let's just finish this paragraph off. Okay. So we can then say Wilde's continual use of amplifiers surrounding the prison conditions extend or lengthen the horrors experienced by the young children. Okay, so let's now supplement this. For instance, the writer exacerbates the minuscule size of the children through the amplifier quite. And utterly. And he also says very as well, so quite, very, and utterly. This is a question 3 for those asking for that. Okay. And then after question 3, we'll be doing a Kahoot. Okay. This deepens the severity at which these injustices occur. And convey how the brutality of prison life should not be shared with the extreme youth. Okay. So I'm going to stop there now. I'll make this document available, which has the answer to our 2 questions that we looked at. And remember, this document is also available on the night before the actual exam. We're going to go over some more questions. Since we've gone through questions 2 and 3, maybe we'll focus more on question 4 and look at how to answer that. But let's now move on to Kahoot. So for those of you who are on TikTok, give me a second. I will be mainly hosting it via YouTube, the Kahoot. So Okay. Doing a Kahoot in a second. And we'll make it linked to English language somehow. Or English language paper 2 specifically. Oh, and we'll do section B as well, the night before the exam. Yeah, I'll be sharing the game pin soon. I just need to find an English language game. Okay. Let's do this Kahoot.